The bear keeps hugging crying puppies. When the vets found out why, everyone was in tears. The rain battered against the windows of Silver Creek Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, each drop a tiny percussion against the glass that drowned out the low whimpering from Enclosure 7. Dr. Caroline Marsh paused at the door, clipboard in hand, her eyes fixed on the young black bear curled into the corner. 2 months since they'd pulled Boon from that ravine, and still he refused to make progress, any change. Ranger Eli Jensen's voice came from behind her, quiet and tinged with the same concern that had been growing between them for weeks now. Caroline shook her head, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Still won't eat properly. Heart rate elevated. Barely sleeps. She tapped her pen against the clipboard, the repetitive sound a physical manifestation of her frustration. I've never seen trauma this deep in a bear his age. Eli stepped closer to the reinforced glass, his broad shoulders slumping slightly as he watched the bear. At 2 years old, Boon should have been vibrant, curious, perhaps even difficult to manage with youthful energy. Instead, he lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest, eyes staring at nothing. He watched his mother die, Eli said softly, the words hanging in the air between them. Shot by poachers. By the time we found them, he didn't need to finish. They both remembered the scene, the mother bear's body, the bullet wounds, and Boon, severely injured but still pressing against her, refusing to leave. What the official report didn't contain, what only Caroline, Eli, and the center's board knew, was that Boon had a history more complex than most rehabilitation cases. Before his mother's death, after what appeared to be an earlier accident, he had been secretly cared for by a local Native American family. Mr. Sam Carter had raised the bear cub after losing his youngest son in a tragic accident. The authorities had discovered this illegal arrangement, and Boon had been forcibly removed under wildlife protection laws. Double trauma, Caroline murmured. Losing his mother, then being separated from the Carter family. It's no wonder he's shut down. Eli nodded, his weathered face solemn in the dim light. At 43, the wildlife recovery coordinator had seen his share of difficult cases, but something about Boon had gotten under his skin. Perhaps it was the bear's eyes, dark pools that seemed to hold a grief too human for comfort. If he doesn't start showing improvement by the end of the month, the board might consider. I know, Caroline cut him off, not wanting to hear it spoken aloud. Euthanasia was always the last resort, but for animals that couldn't recover enough to return to the wild or live in captivity without suffering, it sometimes became the only humane option. The thought made her stomach clench. We still have time. Their conversation was interrupted by the center's front doorbell, an unusual sound at nearly 10 at night. Caroline frowned, glancing at her watch. Who could that be in this weather? When she pulled open the heavy front door, wind and rain rushed in along with a teenage girl clutching a large cardboard box to her chest. The girl's blonde hair was plastered to her face, her jacket soaked through. Please, she said, voice trembling, from cold or emotion, Caroline couldn't tell which. I found them abandoned by the creek. I tried calling the animal shelter and the vet clinics, but no one answered this late, and I didn't know where else to go. Caroline ushered the girl inside. I'm Dr. Marsh. What's your name? Megan. Megan Hill. I'm 16. The girl carefully set the box down, and now Caroline could hear small whimpering sounds coming from inside. They're puppies, 3 of them. I think they're golden retrievers, but I'm not sure. Someone just left them there in the rain. Caroline knelt beside the box. Inside, 3 small puppies huddled together, wet and shivering. 2 appeared relatively strong despite their ordeal, while the third, smaller than the others, was clearly struggling, its breathing labored. "They're not really what we handle here," Caroline began, but the sight of the smallest puppy's glazed eyes made her pause. "But it's too late to take them anywhere else tonight, especially this little one. He needs immediate care." Eli had joined them and was already gathering towels from a nearby supply closet. "The smallest one has a fever," he noted, gently lifting the puppy. "Pretty high. Can you help them?" Megan's blue eyes were wide with worry. "I would take them home, but my mom's allergic, and we can't." "It's okay," Caroline assured her, making a quick decision. "We'll keep them here tonight. Tomorrow we can arrange proper placement. But for now, they need warmth and medicine." Within an hour, the puppies had been dried, examined, and placed in a small incubator in the treatment room. The 2 stronger ones, whom Megan had already named Buddy and Scout, were responding well to the warmth and had eagerly lapped up some diluted puppy formula. The smallest, now called Finn, remained concerning. Respiratory infection, Caroline told Eli as she administered a small dose of antibiotics to the weakest puppy. "He's fighting, but he's very weak." After getting Megan's contact information and sending her home with assurances they'd update her tomorrow, Caroline and Eli prepared to close up for the night. Kayla Monroe, the center's 25-year-old veterinary assistant, volunteered to stay overnight to monitor both Boon and the unexpected puppies. "I'll check on them every hour," Kayla promised, her dark eyes serious behind her glasses. "Do you think the little one will make it?" Caroline sighed, gathering her rain jacket. "Honestly, I'm not sure. But we'll do our best." Morning brought weak sunshine and an unexpected development. As Kayla carried the incubator past Boon's enclosure to bring the puppies to the main treatment area, the bear suddenly rose to his feet, the first voluntary movement he'd made in weeks that wasn't prompted by feeding or medical procedures. Caroline, who had just arrived, froze in the hallway as she witnessed Boon approach the glass wall of his enclosure, his attention fixed intently on the passing incubator. When Finn coughed, a harsh, rattling sound, Boon let out a deep rumbling noise and lightly thumped against the glass, a soft whimper escaping him. "Kayla, wait," Caroline said quietly, motioning for her assistant to pause. "Look at Boon." The bear's behavior became even more remarkable when Buddy, the most adventurous of the puppies, pulled out a small towel and managed to crawl toward the edge of the incubator that faced Boon's enclosure. Instead of displaying any predatory interest, Boon pressed his nose to the glass and emitted a soft whine that sounded almost reassuring. "I've never seen anything like this," Kayla whispered, careful not to disrupt whatever was happening. Caroline's scientific mind raced with possibilities. Bears were primarily solitary creatures, but they were also intelligent, with complex emotional lives rarely witnessed by humans. Boon's history, raised by a human family after losing his mother once before, had clearly impacted his development and behavioral patterns. When Eli arrived an hour later, Caroline pulled him into her office, excitement making her words tumble out faster than usual. "I want to try something. It might sound crazy, but I think it could help both Boon and the puppies." "I'm listening," Eli said, leaning against her desk with arms crossed, expression curious. "I want to place the puppy's incubator near Boon's enclosure, with all safety precautions, of course. There's something happening between them." When Boon heard Finn coughing, he responded. "He's shown more interest in those puppies than in anything since he arrived." Eli frowned. "Caroline, that's a predator and potential prey in close proximity. The board would never, we'll maintain complete separation," she insisted. "The glass barrier stays in place." "But Eli, you didn't see him." "It wasn't predatory interest. It was something else." After much debate and with strict protocols in place, Caroline's experiment began. The Puppies incubator was positioned near Boon's enclosure with constant video monitoring and staff present at all times. The results were beyond what anyone had anticipated. Enough that preparations for his eventual release needed to begin, starting with minimizing his human contact and any unusual attachments. Following procedure, Eli and 2 assistants prepared to lightly sedate Boon to move him to a more isolated enclosure, a still crate that would begin the process of reacclimating him to transport conditions. Caroline stood by him, heart heavy but professional, mask firmly in place as the team approached Boon's enclosure with the tranquilizer. The moment the dart struck, Boon let out a confused whimper. Across the room, Finn, now stronger and more alert, heard the sound and began barking frantically, scratching at the incubator wall that faced Boon. The other puppies joined in, their distress escalating as Boon's sedation began taking effect. Then, to everyone's horror, Finn suddenly collapsed, his small body convulsing as he struggled to breathe, the excitement apparently triggering a relapse of his respiratory condition. Despite the sedative, Boon reacted with shocking violence, his heart rate surged on the monitors, and he struggled to stand, roaring loudly and shaking the metal transport cage that had been wheeled in. The instruments showed his vitals spiking dangerously, a severe stress reaction that could potentially be fatal. "Stop!" Caroline shouted, rushing toward Finn while gesturing wildly at Eli. "Everyone stop. We have 2 medical emergencies." The next hours passed in a blur of emergency interventions. Finn was stabilized with oxygen and medication, while Boon received counteragents to the sedative and heart rate stabilizers. By evening, both were out of immediate danger, but the incident had shaken everyone at the center. In her office later that night, Caroline sat with Eli, both exhausted and subdued. "We can't separate them," she said, finally breaking the long silence. "You saw what happened today. If they're separated," she couldn't finish the sentence. "Can either of them survive it?" Eli completed the thought, running a hand over his face. "I don't know, Caroline. But what's the alternative? We can't release a bear that's bonded with domestic pets, and we can't keep puppies at a wildlife rehabilitation center indefinitely." Caroline stared at the phone on her desk, an idea forming. "Maybe we need outside expertise, someone who specializes in unusual animal bonds." "You're thinking of Lisa Townsend," Eli said, recognition dawning in his eyes. Caroline nodded. Lisa Townsend ran Willow Haven Sanctuary, a private facility known for its groundbreaking work with traumatized wildlife and cross-species relationships. She had published several papers on animal grief and bonding patterns that Caroline had studied during her doctoral work. "It's worth a call," Caroline said, reaching for the phone. 2 days later, Lisa Townsend stood in the monitoring room, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun as she observed the interaction between Boon and the puppies. At 55, Lisa had spent over 30 years studying animal behavior, and very little surprised her anymore. But the scene before her had rendered her momentarily speechless. The puppies had been carefully moved into a secure, custom-built enclosure adjacent to Boon, with a reinforced mesh barrier between them that allowed for visual and limited physical contact while ensuring safety. Finn lay pressed against this barrier, his small body aligned with Boon's massive paw on the other side. The bear was making soft chuffing sounds that seemed to soothe the puppy, whose breathing remained steady and calm. "This is extraordinary," Lisa finally said, turning to Caroline and Eli. "I've documented interspecies bonding before, but this," she gestured toward the monitors, "this is a true parent-child bond. Boon is displaying every marker of maternal care behavior. Can you help us?" Caroline asked. "The board is pushing for standard protocol, but after what happened during the attempted separation," Lisa's expression grew serious. "Separating them permanently at this stage would likely cause severe psychological trauma to both Boon and the puppies, particularly Finn. The bond appears to be mutual and deeply established." Eli leaned forward. "But Boon is a wild animal. Eventually, he should return to the forest. And the puppies, they're domestic animals that need homes. Not all rehabilitated wildlife can return to the wild," Lisa pointed out gently. "Some animals, due to injury or behavioral changes, require sanctuary placement. And from what you've told me about Boon's history," she paused, her eyes softening with understanding. "This bond wasn't formed solely here at the center. It was born out of layered grief, the loss of his mother, the loss of his adoptive caregiver, and now, potentially, another loss." That night, unable to sleep, Caroline pulled Boon's complete case file, reading through it again. Details she had previously glossed over suddenly stood out with new significance. The Carter family, who had illegally raised Boon, had done so after losing their youngest son in a drowning accident. Mr. Sam Carter, in his statement to authorities, had said, "After losing our boy, caring for Boon helped us heal. He became family." Family, the word echoed in Caroline's mind as she stared at the photograph of Boon when he was first found, a small cub clinging to the lifeless body of his mother. Loss upon loss. The next morning, Caroline, Eli, and Lisa presented an unprecedented proposal to the board. Willow Haven Sanctuary would take in all 4 animals, Boon and the 3 puppies, providing a private forested area, a custom-designed enclosure, monitoring systems, and a team of experts to ensure both appropriate care and scientific documentation of this unusual family unit. This case offers a unique opportunity to study cross-species bonding, grief response, and adaptive behavior, Lisa explained to the skeptical board members. The knowledge we gain could advance our understanding of wildlife rehabilitation practices and improve outcomes for traumatized animals. After hours of debate, with Caroline presenting the medical evidence of the physiological dependency that had developed, the board reluctantly approved the transfer, with strict conditions for ongoing monitoring and reporting. 2 weeks later, Caroline stood with Eli at the entrance to Silver Creek, watching as the specially designed transport vehicle pulled away, carrying Boon and his 3 unlikely adopted puppies to their new home at Willow Haven. "Did we do the right thing?" Eli asked quietly, the question that had been weighing on both their minds. Caroline thought of Boon's eyes, no longer vacant and lost as they had been for those first terrible weeks, but alert and focused, particularly when watching over Finn. She thought of the small puppy who had fought so hard to survive and now seemed to draw strength from the bear's presence. "I believe we did," she answered, her voice firm despite the emotion tightening her throat. "Sometimes healing comes in unexpected forms, and sometimes," she smiled slightly, watching the vehicle disappear down the long driveway, "sometimes family is what we make it, not what we're born into." 6 months passed like the changing of seasons at Willow Haven, gradually, then suddenly, complete. The maple trees surrounding the sanctuary blazed with autumn colors, their reflection dancing across the small pond where, on this particular morning, a film crew from OPB's Nature and Soul program set up their equipment under Lisa Townsend's watchful eye. "Remember," she cautioned the production team, her tone polite but firm, "minimum disruption. No sudden movements. No loud noises. This is their home, not a studio set." The crew nodded in understanding as they followed Lisa along the winding path toward the specially constructed habitat that had become known among the staff simply as the family enclosure. Unlike traditional animal housing, this 5-acre section of forest had been carefully modified to provide both freedom and safety for its unusual occupants, with observation platforms built high in the trees and subtle monitoring equipment hidden among the foliage. "They're usually in the pine grove this time of morning," Lisa explained quietly. "Boon likes the shade there. And the puppies, well, they're not really puppies anymore. They follow his routine." As they rounded the bend in the path, the cameraman let out a soft gasp, quickly silenced by Lisa's warning glance. But his reaction was understandable. The scene before them seemed lifted from a children's storybook rather than wildlife documentary footage. Boon lay stretched out beneath a tall pine, his black fur gleaming in the dappled sunlight. At nearly 3 years old now, he had grown into his full size, powerful and majestic. But what made the image remarkable was not the bear himself, but his companions. Finn, no longer the sickly puppy fighting for breath, but a sleek young dog with golden fur, was nestled against Boon's chest, his head resting on the thick black fur, one ear pressed to the deep heartbeat he had come to recognize as belonging to his protector. A few feet away, Buddy and Scout, now gangly adolescent dogs with boundless energy, chased each other playfully around the grove, occasionally darting back to nudge Boon or lick his face before resuming their game. "Extraordinary," murmured the program's host, Sarah Chen, her eyes wide as she observed the interaction. "And this happens all the time?" Lisa nodded, pride evident in her smile. "Every day. Boon acts as both mother and teacher to them. Watch what happens when they stray too far." As if on cue, Scout ventured toward the edge of the clearing, his nose leading him in pursuit of some interesting scent. Boon's head lifted immediately, and he let out a deep rumbling sound, not threatening, but clearly communicative. Scout paused, looked back, and after a moment's consideration, trotted back toward the center of the grove. "He sets boundaries," Lisa explained. "Teaches them what's safe, what isn't. In the wild, bear cubs stay with their mothers for about 2 years, learning survival skills. Boon is following that same instinctual pattern with the dogs." The film crew spent the morning documenting the unusual family, capturing footage of their daily routines. Boon leading the dogs to the pond for water, the gentle way he used his paw to guide Finn, still the smallest and most attached to the bear, away from thorny bushes, and the surprisingly delicate manner in which the massive predator shared food with his adopted offspring. During a break in filming, Sarah approached Lisa with the question that had undoubtedly been on everyone's mind. What happens when the dogs mature fully? Will they still need him? Will he still need them? Lisa considered the question carefully before answering. "We don't know with certainty. This is uncharted territory in animal behavior. But based on what we've observed over these 6 months, the bond appears to be permanent rather than transitional, particularly between Boon and Finn." She gestured toward the pond where Finn was never more than a few feet from Boon, always oriented toward the bear as if connected by an invisible tether. "Their attachment isn't just emotional comfort, though that's certainly part of it. It's become integral to their sense of identity and security. Finn's breathing problems return when he's separated from Boon for more than a few hours, and Boon's stress markers elevate significantly when Finn is out of sight. And the sanctuary is prepared to keep them together indefinitely? Sarah asked. Absolutely, Lisa confirmed. We've created a forever home here. Boon cannot be released into the wild, his behavior is too habituated to both humans and domestic animals. And the dogs, while technically adoptable, would likely never adjust to conventional pet homes after their upbringing. Back at the main sanctuary building that afternoon, Caroline Marsh and Eli Jensen arrived for their monthly visit. Though Silver Creek Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was nearly 3 hours away, they had made the journey faithfully every month since the transfer, their professional interest in the case gradually evolving into personal investment. How was the filming? Caroline asked Lisa as they settled into her office, the wall of windows providing a panoramic view of the sanctuary grounds. Successful, I think. Sarah and her team were respectful and patient. Lisa handed them each a tablet displaying the latest medical and behavioral reports. Boon's last physical exam shows excellent health. The limp from his original injury is almost undetectable now. Eli scrolled through the data, nodding with satisfaction. And the socialization tests? Fascinating results, Lisa said, leaning forward. When introduced to other dogs in controlled settings, Buddy and Scout display normal canine social behaviors, appropriate play, communication signals, hierarchy recognition. They're perfectly capable of interacting with their own species. But Finn? Caroline prompted, already suspecting the answer. Finn shows significant anxiety away from Boon and minimal interest in other dogs. He's not aggressive or fearful, just disengaged. His focus remains on returning to Boon. Lisa pulled up a video clip on her computer. Watch this interaction from last week. The footage showed Finn in a neutral play area with 2 friendly Labrador retrievers. While the labs attempted to engage him in play, Finn remained aloof, repeatedly moving to the edge of the enclosure that faced the direction of Boon's habitat, whining softly. He considers himself a bear's child, Caroline murmured, the realization both scientifically remarkable and emotionally moving. Precisely, Lisa agreed. And Boon? Well, when we temporarily move Finn for these socialization tests, Boon positions himself at the nearest point to Finn's location and wouldn't move or eat until he returned. The implications of such profound cross-species bonding extended beyond this single case, and all 3 professionals knew it. The research paper they had co-authored about Boon and the dogs was generating significant attention in wildlife rehabilitation circles, challenging long-held assumptions about species isolation during recovery and opening discussions about emotional needs and rehabilitation protocols. As they walked together to observe the evening feeding routine, Eli mentioned the letter that had arrived at Silver Creek the previous week. Sam Carter saw the preliminary news coverage about the sanctuary. He wrote to us. Caroline had read the letter multiple times, touched by the raw emotion evident in the careful handwriting. I thought I was saving him, but in truth he saved me. And now, knowing he's doing the same for other small souls, I believe my son, somewhere out there, is smiling. Have you considered allowing him to visit? Lisa asked carefully. Under strict guidelines, of course. Caroline and Eli exchanged glances. The question touched on complex ethical and legal considerations. Mr. Carter's original keeping of Boon had been illegal, regardless of his compassionate intentions. We're discussing it with our board, Caroline said finally. There's merit to the idea, particularly from Boon's perspective. He had a positive relationship with Mr. Carter. As they approached the habitat, the evening light filtering through the trees painted everything in warm gold. Boon had led his family to their favorite resting spot, a soft hollow beneath two sheltering pines. The three dogs were curled around him in various positions of contentment, Scout stretched out along his back, Buddy nestled against his side, and Finn, as always, tucked securely against his chest. You know, Eli said softly, when we first found Boon in that ravine, I wouldn't have given him a 10% chance of psychological recovery. The trauma was too severe. Caroline nodded, remembering those desperate early days, the bear who wouldn't eat, wouldn't respond, whose eyes held nothing but emptiness and loss. And now look at him. It's a testament to the power of connection, Lisa observed. Not just any connection, but the right one. The healing one. The story of Boon and his adopted puppies spread across America in the weeks following the OPB broadcast. Social media exploded with clips of the gentle bear teaching the golden retrievers to fish in the shallow pond, guiding them through the forest, or simply watching over them as they slept. Viewers were captivated by the image of Finn pressing his ear to Boon's chest, listening to the heartbeat that had become his anchor. Letters poured into both Silver Creek and Willow Haven, from children drawing pictures of bears and puppies, from adults sharing stories of their own unlikely friendships, from scientists requesting more data, and from donors offering support for the sanctuary's work. Megan Hill, now 17 and volunteering at Silver Creek on weekends, had become something of a celebrity at her high school after the program aired, showcasing her role in bringing the puppies to the center that rainy night. I just did what anyone would do, she told Caroline, embarrassed by the attention. I couldn't leave them there in the storm. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest choices, Caroline had replied, thinking of how a teenager's act of compassion had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just the lives of 4 animals, but potentially the approach to wildlife rehabilitation itself. 1 month after the broadcast, a carefully arranged meeting took place at Willow Haven. Sam Carter, now in his 60s, stood at the observation platform, his weathered hands gripping the railing as he watched Boon and the dogs in their morning routine. He remembers how to fish, Sam said quietly, pride evident in his voice as Boon demonstrated the technique to an attentive buddy. I taught him that when he was just a cub, after we lost Michael. His voice faltered momentarily. My son loved fishing. Teaching Boon somehow kept that connection alive. Caroline stood respectfully at his side, noting the mixture of grief and joy in the man's expression. Mr. Carter, I want to thank you for writing to us. Your insights into Boon's early development have been invaluable to our understanding of his behavior patterns. Sam nodded, his eyes never leaving the bear. When they took him away, I thought I'd failed him, failed Michael too, somehow. But seeing him now, he gestured toward the scene below, where Boon was gently correcting Scout's overenthusiastic splashing. He found his purpose. As autumn deepened into winter, Willow Haven installed heated sleeping dens in the habitat, though the staff noted with interest that Boon showed no signs of preparing for hibernation, a deviation from wild bear behavior that Lisa attributed to his unique upbringing and current family responsibilities. He's adapted his natural cycles to accommodate the dog's needs, she explained during a presentation at the National Wildlife Rehabilitation Conference. Bears are incredibly adaptable creatures, and Boon has essentially created a new behavioral template, one that incorporates both ursine instincts and learned parental responses. The conference presentation included video compilations showing Boon's teaching behaviors, demonstrating to the dogs how to find certain roots and berries, though their diet was primarily supplemented with appropriate dog food, how to use trees for scratching and marking territory, and most remarkably, how to respond to various environmental cues like changes in weather or the presence of other animals near their habitat. On the sanctuary's website, a quote from Lisa became the headline for their educational program. "Sometimes the strongest medicine isn't a drug, but the gentleness that comes from where no one expects." The phrase captured not just Boon's story, but the broader lesson it offered about healing, connection, and the fluid boundaries between species that conventional wisdom had too often considered rigid and impermeable. As the first anniversary of Boon's arrival at Willow Haven approached, Caroline sat in her office at Silver Creek reviewing an application on her desk. The center had created a new protocol for assessing traumatized wildlife, one that now included evaluation of potential emotional needs and attachments, rather than focusing solely on physical recovery. The Boon Protocol, they were calling it informally, though the official documentation used more scientific terminology. Whatever the name, the approach was already showing promising results with several recent cases, particularly a young fox that had responded positively to controlled interaction with a gentle older canine from the sanctuary's therapy program. Outside her window, spring was returning to Silver Creek, the same season in which Boon had first arrived, broken and lost. Caroline thought of him now, surrounded by his unusual family in their forest home, and felt the satisfaction of a healing that had extended far beyond what anyone had initially imagined possible. In the end, perhaps that was the most profound lesson from Boon's journey, that healing rarely followed predictable paths, that family could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes, the most powerful medicine was simply the presence of another beating heart that understood your own.